What is going on, everybody? The NFL draft is 1 day away. We are right there, and usually right before the draft, I like to have my annual what I would do mock draft. So this is not me trying to predict the pick. Rather, this is me stepping into the shoes of every NFL team and making the picks that I think they should go with. You have to keep some things in mind before we start real quick. Everybody has different opinions on these players. So if I'm drafting a guy who's currently projected to go in the second round, but I have him as a first round talent on my board, I'm going to have him go in the first round. So you may think, why would we pick this guy here when we can get him way later? This is based off of my rankings of the players and my evaluations. So this is not at all what the draft is going to look like in real life, but this is just me stepping into the shoes of each of these teams and making the picks that I believe would best benefit them. So without further ado, we're going to get started here. 2 rounds, no trades. Let's do this. With the number 1 pick, I had the Jaguars going Ikem Ekwonu, the offensive tackle out of NC State. It doesn't seem like this is the route they're going to end up going, but if I was Jacksonville and if I was making the pick, I would personally pick Ekwonu. If you're a team like the Jaguars who don't need a quarterback, I think that you should pick the best football player in the draft. And for me, my number 1 graded player in this draft class is Ikem Ekwonu. I don't think he is as good as most number 1 players, but this year's class isn't as top heavy, so for me, he's the number 1 prospect in this draft. I think you could rationalize 4 players going here. Ekwonu, Aiden Hutchinson, Evan Neal, and Kayvon Thibodeaux. I think all 4 of those players would be good picks here at number 1 for Jacksonville. Of course, the Jaguars, being that they're the Jaguars, are finding a way to mess this up and pick none of those 4 players with the Trayvon Walker rumors. But if you can get some more elite offensive linemen in front of Trevor Lawrence, it's a big deal. I know the Jaguars extended Cam Robinson today, but it doesn't hurt to add another tackle. I know they drafted Walker Little. I know they have Jawan Taylor, but Ikem Ekwonu is better than both Little and Taylor. In worst case, you could play him at guard. Obviously, you don't want to draft a guard number 1 overall, but if you did play him there, he'd be damn good. I have Aiden Hutchinson here at 2 to the Detroit Lions. Assuming it is Trayvon Walker who goes off the board at 1, it comes down to Hutchinson and Thibodeaux in real life, and that's what it came down for me in this video. And if the Lions pick Kayvon Thibodeaux, as a Lion fan, I would not be upset at all, even if Aiden Hutchinson's on the board. I think Thibodeaux is an extraordinary talent, but I think Hutchinson is a perfect fit for the Dan Campbell locker room. I have Hutchinson graded out slightly higher than Kayvon Thibodeaux, but again, if we were to pick Thibodeaux over Hutchinson, I would not be upset in the slightest. Evan Neal, the tackle out of Alabama, goes to the Texans. The Texans' biggest need is not offensive tackle, but Houston cannot be drafting for needs. They're a bad football team. I think they really got to focus on best player available. And Evan Neal is my 2nd overall player in this draft class behind Ikem Ekwonu. So the value is good, and I think he would be a fantastic pick for them. The Jets at 4 select Kayvon Thibodeaux from Oregon, looking to add a truly dynamic pass rusher. I think it's Hutchinson and him and everybody else when it comes to the pass rushers in this class. With Hutchinson off the board, I think this is a pretty easy pick here for the Jets to go up and get Thibodeaux. So this is really where it gets interesting. Those top 4 picks were all pretty easy for me. And as we get to 5, it gets a little bit more challenging. The Giants have 2 picks in the top 7. If the Giants only had 1 first-round pick here, I would not pick Charles Cross. I would just pick Sauce Gardner. But New York has 2 first-round picks right here. They need to pick a tackle. 2 of the top 3 tackles are off the board, and Carolina would be wise to go with an offensive tackle at 6. So if the Giants are going to pick an offensive tackle, which it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that they will, they got to do it here. So even if guys like Sauce Gardner are higher on my board than Charles Cross, we're realizing that the Panthers are going to pick him at 6. So would you rather Charles Cross and Sauce Gardner, or Sauce Gardner and somebody worse than Charles Cross? Give me Cross and Gardner. So that brings up Carolina at 6, and it puts us in a peculiar position. I could have made it easy for myself and just picked Sauce at 5 and let Charles Cross fall to 6. But when I'm picking for the Giants, I'm trying to make the Giants better, not the Panthers. So as I get to the Panther pick and the top 3 tackles are off the board, we're stuck in limbo. I don't think Carolina should pick a quarterback at 6. I don't think there's a QB worthy of going here. I think they would completely ruin Malik Willis, so I don't want to see him in Carolina. And I don't think there's another quarterback who I would personally pick in the first round. So as I look at Carolina's roster, I look at their needs. The top 2 players on my board are corner, Sauce Gardner and Derek Stingley. And then right with them is wide receiver with Jameson Williams and Garrett Wilson. They don't need corners or receivers at all. Even though those are my 4 highest ranked players on the board currently, Carolina does not need them at all. So I'm going to go off the rails a little bit and pick Zion Johnson from Boston College. An ideal scenario would be trading down here. But since there are no trades in this video, Carolina's stuck with this pick. This obviously is not ideal, but Zion Johnson is a fantastic football player. They need guard as much as they need tackle. And although I think those top 3 tackles would be better picks here, I think Zion Johnson's a fantastic football player. I think he's a better football player than Charles Cross, if we're being honest, but Cross just plays the more important position. So no, this is not an ideal scenario at all for the Carolina Panthers, but I think this makes the most sense if the top 3 tackles are off the board and if you can't make a trade down. Speaking of Sauce Gardner, he's off the board here to the Giants at 7. I have Sauce Gardner as my number 3 ranked player in the entire draft class. I think Houston should consider him at 3. I think the Jets should consider him at 4. And as I said, he would have been the pick at 5 had it not been that Carolina needs a tackle so badly. So Sauce Gardner at 7 is fantastic value, whatever way you look at it. And then Atlanta at 8 is an interesting one. I've been mocking them with a receiver for quite some time. I think Jameson Williams and Garrett Wilson will both be good picks here. But I think Atlanta should focus on the defense. Their defense was abysmal last year, and I know their offense is not very good either, but the upside of Derek Stingley here might be too hard to pass up. Him on one side, A.J. Terrell on the other side. Sheesh, that's nasty. The Seattle Seahawks here at 9 was another very awkward pick for me, and assuming Seattle plays their cards right, which with Seattle in the first round you never really know, they should get a better pick here at 9. I think there's a good shot one of the corners falls, probably Stingley, maybe one of the tackles fall. So if Seattle does not pull a wild card, which again, it's Seattle, so I wouldn't bet on that, but if like an Evan Neal or a Charles Cross or a Derek Stingley is on the board here, they should probably be the pick, but they're all gone. My top 2 players are the 2 wide receivers, Garrett Wilson and Jameson Williams. Seattle's not picking a wide receiver here. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. My next player after them is Devin Lloyd. I think it's too early for a linebacker here at 9. So we're going to go with my player after those guys. That's Trent McDuffie, the cornerback out of Washington. I don't think McDuffie should be a top 10 pick, but with how the board played out here, I think this is the best course of action here for the Seattle Seahawks. Again, ideally, somebody like Derek Stingley is off the board, but since he's gone, McDuffie's going to be the pick here instead. Again, I could have made it a lot easier for myself by picking a guy like Garrett Wilson at 8 and had Stingley fall, but again, when I'm drafting for the Atlanta Falcons, I'm trying to help out the Falcons, not the Seahawks. So that's the most fair way of looking at it, and I think McDuffie would be the best pick for them of the guys left on the board. So the Jets here at 10, they're a wide receiver needy team. We can finally pick one off the board, but it may not be the one you guys expect, because if you saw my offensive player rankings video, I have Garrett Wilson as wide receiver 1. I think Wilson would be a fantastic pick here, don't get me wrong, but I think Jameson Williams makes a little bit more sense for the Jets, and I think Garrett Wilson and Jameson Williams, the gap between them is very minuscule. Jameson Williams is somebody who can be a game changer. He can blow the top off of a defense. I think the Jets have a number of sturdy and reliable receivers like Elijah Moore, Braxton Berrios, Corey Davis, Jameson Crowder, even though he's probably not a piece for the future. So why not go ahead and get a big play threat? Garrett Wilson is absolutely a big play threat, but I think Jameson Williams is better in that scenario, and I think he's a better fit for what the Jets are looking for. So that's why I have Jameson going here, and then Garrett Wilson's the very next pick to the Washington Commanders. I don't think Washington has to pick a wide receiver here in the first round, but this is just too good a value to pass up. I think Atlanta would be wise to consider him at 8. I think, hell, the Giants would be wise to consider him with either their 2 picks. The Jets at 10 would make a lot of sense. So Wilson's probably going to be off the board here by 11. And he is definitely better than the 11th best player in the draft. I have him as my 6th overall player in the class. but just with how the board plays out, he falls a little bit. The Commanders are gladly going to scoop him up, however. Kyle Hamilton at 12 to the Vikings. Kyle Hamilton's arguably the best player on the board. Get someone who can go alongside Harrison Smith. Not a whole lot to say about this pick. I think this is something that could definitely happen in real life. Devin Lloyd to the Texans. I mocked him in my previous predictive mock draft, and I like that idea enough to where if the board plays out like this, I think Houston should pick Devin Lloyd at 13. I have Lloyd as my 9th-ranked player in the class, and it's always risky to pick linebackers early, but I think Devin Lloyd is one of the safer players in this class. High-character guy. He's going to make an early impact right away. I think this would be a nice pick for the Texans. The Ravens at 14 go Trayvon Walker, edge rusher from Georgia. Again, I think Walker will be the first pick to the Jaguars, but I don't see Trayvon Walker as a top 10 guy. I like the fit in Baltimore because they know how to develop raw pass rushers with elite tools, and Trayvon Walker's tools are very, very elite. So Baltimore would be a home run landing spot for Trayvon Walker. The problem is he's going to get overdrafted. Dax Hill, defensive back out of Michigan to the Eagles. I'm very high on Dax Hill. I think he's really, really good. The top 3 corners are off the board here, so the Eagles will gladly settle for Hill instead, who can play the nickel. He can play safety, which is probably where he'd play long-term. I think the value here would be very good. George Pickens, wide receiver, Georgia to the Saints. I don't think this is the best fit for Pickens, but the value here I think is too good. I am very high on George Pickens. I have him as my wide receiver 3. I don't think he's going to end up this high, but I think he's someone who has the upside to be an elite wide receiver in the NFL one day. So I would consider him here in the middle of the first round, but I don't expect him to go this high. I would expect him to go more towards the back end of round 1. The Chargers' front 7 was not good last year, and they made a number of moves to improve it. Obviously, the big trade for Khalil Mack. They also made some very solid signings. I thought Sebastian Joseph-Day from the Rams was a good pickup. But they could still use some more bodies on that defensive line. And Jordan Davis, he's got a body. All right. The Chargers' run defense was atrocious last year, so now you plug Davis into the middle of that defensive line. That would be nasty. Jermaine Johnson off the board here, the edge rusher out of Florida State to the Eagles. He's going to go earlier than this, probably in the top 10. I'm just not as high on Johnson as other people. I think he's a good player, but I don't think he has the upside that warrants a top 10 pick. So that's why he falls a little bit, but here at 18, I don't have a problem with it at all. The Saints double dip at wide receiver. I gave them George Pickens earlier. Now they go with Chris Olave. So they go for the big swing with Pickens, and now the more sure thing with Chris Olave. The Saints' only real starting caliber wide receiver is Michael Thomas, and he's played 7 games in the last 2 seasons, so he has not been dependable. Even on the field, he's the only guy they got. So now you add 2 really good wide receivers. With how the wide receiver market has been trending as of recent, those guys are getting paid big bucks. So if you can have young receivers on rookie contracts who are very good, that's a big deal. But you know what's better than that? 2 really good receivers on rookie contracts. And I think George Pickens and Chris Olave are both really good. We finally have a quarterback off the board, Malik Willis out of Liberty to the Steelers here at 20. He's going to go earlier than this. I just don't think he should go earlier than this. He is my QB1, but I don't think he's warranting a top 10 pick. Carolina at 6, they obviously need a quarterback, but I think they should steer clear of that. Teams like Atlanta and Seattle could certainly be in the consideration. Maybe a wild card like Washington or Minnesota, although I find both of those highly unlikely. But if this happened in real life, the Steelers would be tickled pink. It's a very poorly kept secret that the Steelers love Malik Willis. I am expecting them to try to move up and get Willis tomorrow night. I think that's a very realistic scenario, but here he falls to 20. I think he's the best quarterback in the draft, and I think this makes sense for the Steelers. If Pittsburgh keeps pick 20 and Willis is the only quarterback off the board, I don't think the Steelers should go QB. I think they should look elsewhere. Kenyon Green, guard out of Texas A&M to the Patriots. There are some new medical concerns coming out about Green today. Interesting timing, which I guess with this week, you never really know what's true and what's not true. I think Kenyon Green's a first-round talent, but I feel like the league is not going to be as high on him. That's sort of just a gut prediction. I think he ends up going in the second round, but I think he should go in the first round. Jahan Dotson, wide receiver, Penn State to the Green Bay Packers. One could argue that maybe Drake London would be a better pick here, but don't worry, Packers. Maybe you'll still get that opportunity to get Drake London. Spoiler alert. I think Dotson's the better prospect, though, and this gives you a reliable receiver who's probably Green Bay's wide receiver 1 at the moment, which just goes to show how bad their receiving core is. But I think Jahan Dotson will make Aaron Rodgers very happy. Kind of like Kenyon Green, I expect Tyler Linderbaum to go later than some expect. I recently had him mocked in the second round as well in my last mock draft. But again, I think he's a first-round talent. The Cardinals need guard and center. You could always try to bulk him up and have him at guard. But even so, Rodney Hudson's not getting any younger, so he could be the long-term center of the future. And then George Karlaftis, the edge rusher from Purdue to the Cowboys. I'm really curious to see where he ends up because I think there's a world where he goes in like the 15 to 20 range. I also think there's a world where he goes in like the late 30s. So I really do not know what Karlaftis' stock looks like. So I'm very curious to see where he ends up. I view him as a fringe first-round guy for me, and I think the value here at 24 would be perfectly fine. Kaiir Elam is off the board to the Bills here at 25. I think this would be a fantastic value selection for the Buffalo Bills. I think Elam's better than the 25th best football player in the draft. So in this scenario, no-brainer. That was one of the easiest picks I made all day. Arnold Ebiketie, the edge rusher of Penn State, to the Titans. So in my last few mock drafts, I have given the Titans Desmond Ridder, the quarterback from Cincinnati. My bold prediction is that the Titans do pick a quarterback on Thursday night. And I don't think they shouldn't pick a QB, but I just don't think there are any other than Malik Willis worthy of going in this range, which is why I'm not picking a quarterback here. But I don't think picking a QB would be a bad move, per se, by the Tennessee Titans. And maybe they could consider it later in the draft, although they don't pick again until the third round. I do like Ebiketie. This is a little bit higher than he is on my board. I think he's in the 30s in my draft board, but I don't have a problem with going him here this stage in the first round. He's a very good player, high floor guy. The Titans prefer to make big swings with their first round pick, so I don't think they would consider a guy like Ebiketie over someone, say, like David Ojabo, who has more upside. But if I'm drafting for the Titans, this is the pick I would make. Jalen Petrie, defensive back out of Baylor and the Bucs. They don't need defensive back, but they've got some guys who are impending free agents within the coming seasons. Jamel Dean and Sean Murphy-Bunting are both free agents at the end of the season. They've just lost Jordan Whitehead. Antoine Winfield Jr. is a free agent in a couple years, although I would assume they're going to do everything they can to bring him back. Jalen Petrie is a versatile defensive back who can provide a number of different things. He would mainly be a depth piece as a rookie with playing time here and there, and then I think he becomes a full-time starter as a safety or at slot corner in year 2. Drake London is off the board here to the Packers. Just like New Orleans, I have Green Bay double-dipping at wide receiver. Again, same logic with New Orleans. If you can get 2 very good rookie deals for your receivers, that's big. The Saints and Packers each picked 1 high upside receiver and 1 high floor receiver. For Green Bay, Dotson has the high floor. Drake London has the high ceiling. Speaking of high ceilings, the Chiefs with back-to-back picks start with David Ojabo out of the University of Michigan. I would like to see the Chiefs make a big gamble with one of these 2 picks, and Ojabo is definitely a gamble. Coming off the Achilles injury, he's a more raw player as is, but the athleticism and the upside is sky high. Andrew Booth, cornerback out of Clemson, is the following pick. With their second pick, I think they should go for someone who's a little bit more ready, although Andrew Booth did just have the sports hernia surgery last month, so maybe he's not fully ready, but I think he's got better ball skills than any defensive back in this class and is one of the best defensive playmakers overall. Nakobe Dean, linebacker, Georgia to the Bengals. Dean is another guy who I think goes later than expected. I believe he will be a mid-second round pick. I know that's bold. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just what my gut tells me right now. But again, I think he's a first-round guy. And although the Bengals arguably have bigger needs, I think their roster is in a position where you can go best player on the board. And for me, one of the best players on the board is Dean. Then the Lions at 32 go Jaquan Brisker, safety out of Penn State. I think Lewis Cine is probably a better fit, but I think Brisker is slightly the better prospect. So I think, as I like to say, good players make it work, and I think Jaquan Brisker would certainly be able to make it work in that Detroit secondary. So now the Jaguars are on the board here at 33. They go Nick Cross, safety out of Maryland. In my previous predictive mock draft, I had the Jaguars picking him in round 3. However, I'm higher on Nick Cross than just about anybody. I see him as a fringe first-round guy, so that's where you're going to have to pick him, since this is based off of my board. Detroit at 34 goes Treylon Burks, wide receiver out of Arkansas. I'm not as high on Burks as others. I don't love the fit with Detroit because I would rather the Lions get more of a prototypical X receiver. And although Treylon Burks, I think, has the size and frame to be that wasn't really his role at Arkansas. So given like Burks and George Pickens, I would rather a guy like George Pickens, not just because I think Pickens is better, which he is, but I think that's just what the Lions should look for at receiver right now. However, I think after Treylon Burks, there's a gap at wide receiver. So even though Alec Pierce and Christian Watson may fit what I want more, Treylon Burks is significantly better than those guys in my opinion. So that's why Burks ends up being the pick here. Leo Chenal, linebacker, Wisconsin, to the New York Jets. I think Chenal is a very, very good player. I don't know if he ends up going this high. I think there's a shot, but unlikely. But I do like Leo Chenal. Big guy. I think he can do a lot of different things on your defense, and he would certainly make the Jets quite a bit better on that side of the ball. Travis Jones, interior defensive lineman out of UConn, to the New York Football Giants. I think they could use some more guys in the middle of that defensive line. Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence are fine players, but it doesn't hurt to add another body, and I think Travis Jones is quite good. Lewis Cine, safety out of Georgia, to the Texans. I think I'm a little bit lower on Cine than the consensus, and I do think he ends up probably in the late first round, but I'm not that much lower on him than people. I think he would be the best safety here on the board and would be good value for the Texans. Tariq Woolen, cornerback, UTSA, to the Jets. He's probably not going to go this high. I think Woolen's going to go earlier than people expect, but probably more so in like the 50s. Woolen is an unbelievable physical specimen. He has all the traits to be an elite corner, and he's my top-ranked cornerback on the board right now, and after him there is a drop-off, so that's why I have him going this high. Sky Moore, wide receiver for Western Michigan, to the Bears. The Bears need someone who's reliable, who can get open, and who can catch the football, and Sky Moore can do that for you. And then Tyler Smith, tackle out of Tulsa, to Seattle. I think Tyler Smith will go in the first round, and I don't think that would be a mistake, because I think after the top three tackles of Ekwonu, Neal, and Cross, Tyler Smith is my next offensive tackle in the class. So say a team late in the first round like Green Bay or Tennessee or somebody like that were to pick him, I really would not have a problem with it, even though he's at like, I think 40 on my overall board, fitting that he goes 40 here. I would not have a problem with the team picking him in the late first round. But this would be a home run for Seattle. The board plays out a lot better for them than it did in round one. The way I see this QB class is Malik Willis, and then a gap, and then Sam Howell, and then another gap, and then Pickett, Ritter, and Corral. So I think Sam Howell is worth an early second-round pick. I really like his potential, and I think he's better than people realize. And the Seattle Seahawks don't have their franchise quarterback on the roster. Drew Lock is a fine little stopgap experiment, but if Sam Howell's here in the early portion of the second round, I think Seattle will be hard-pressed not to think about him, and I'm going to end up pulling the trigger. Christian Watson, wide receiver, North Dakota State, to the Indianapolis Colts. I would like to see the Colts take a big swing at wide receiver. And Christian Watson, oh boy, he's a big swing. He could be a grand slam, or he could be a total whiff. Watson has the upside to be very good, but is not refined or polished at all. I think he'll really develop depending on the situation he ends up in. Devontae Wyatt, interior defensive lineman from Georgia, to the Falcons. He is way better than the 43rd best football player in this draft class, but there are some question marks about him. He's an older prospect at 24 years old. He also has the domestic violence issue that recently came out, so that's why he slips down a little bit for me. But assuming the character checks out, I think this would be very good value. Josh Pascal, edge rusher from Kentucky, to the Browns. He's sort of a tweener. I'm not sure if he's going to be an edge guy or more of an interior defensive lineman, but he's a great run stopper, and I think he is underrated. I think he's an early to mid-second round guy. Kyler Gordon, cornerback out of Washington, to the Ravens. He probably ends up a little bit earlier than this. I'd be a little bit surprised if he was a first-round pick, but I see a world where that's possible. But he ends up here going to Baltimore. I think this will be pretty good value for a team who could use another corner alongside Humphrey and Peters. Dylan Parham, guard from Memphis, to the Vikings. This is a pretty simple pick. You draft Dylan Parham, you start him, and you're set at that position for a decade. Let's move on here. The Washington Commanders get Quay Walker, linebacker from Georgia, another guy who has a really good shot of ending up in the first round. I don't see him as a first-round guy, in my opinion, but I think here in the second round he'd be really solid value. Washington wants a linebacker. They drafted Jamin Davis, who's more of your athletic cover guy last year, so now you get your big, bruising, between the tackles type of linebacker with Quay Walker. Bernard Raymond, tackle out of Central Michigan, to the Bears. This is really where my next tier of tackles start to come off the board, with Raymond, Trevor Penning, Max Mitchell. I know Penning is a surefire first-rounder, and Bernard Raymond is a very good shot at being a first-rounder. I'm just not as high on either of those players. I think their range is more so around here, towards the middle of the second round. I think this would be fine value for the Chicago Bears. I just don't see Raymond as a first-round guy. I mean, he's raw, he's old. Those two things don't normally mesh well together. Speaking of Trevor Penning, here he is off the board to New Orleans here at 49. Trevor Penning is a very realistic candidate to go to the New Orleans Saints in the first round. However, I don't see him as a first-round guy. I think he might have first-round traits, but he's got a lot of work to do, and I think here on day 2 is more his range, in my opinion. Khalil Shakir, wide receiver, Boise State to the Chiefs. He is a weapon with the ball in his hands, and if you can add more weapons to what is already a scary offense, that is just going to make them scarier. Alec Pierce, wide receiver, Cincinnati to the Eagles. I think Philadelphia fans may get some bad J.J. Arcega-Whiteside PTSD because Alec Pierce has some similarities. The weaknesses are the same. Neither of them were great separators coming out of college, and obviously that has been an issue for Arcega-Whiteside. Pierce is also a big-bodied receiver, but I think he's a lot better than J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. I don't think you're getting J.J. Arcega-Whiteside 2.0 here, so I would think this would be a solid pick for them. Max Mitchell, tackle out of Louisiana to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think he could start right away. I think he's got a significantly higher floor than both Penning and Raymond, and I think those three guys are all similar in terms of grades. Drake Jackson, edge rusher, USC to the Packers. I like Drake Jackson quite a bit. He's raw, but he's got some good traits, and I think Green Bay has done a good job in recent years of developing young pass rushers. Chad Muma, linebacker, Wyoming to New England. Maybe New England wants more of a raw, athletic linebacker like a Christian Harris, per se. But I think this is a little bit too early for him, or maybe a Damone Clark, but with the injury, again, probably a little bit early. Chad Muma is going to be a good player right away. I think he's going to be able to contribute at a high level as a rookie, and I think he would be a nice fit for this defense. Logan Hall, interior defensive lineman out of Houston, goes to the Arizona Cardinals. There's a good shot Hall ends up in the first round. He's getting some legit first-round buzz. I'm buying it, but I don't quite think he's that good. But here in the late second round, I don't really have a problem with it. So he's going to be the pick here for the Cardinals. And then Jalen Armour-Davis, cornerback from Alabama to the Cowboys. He's raw, but he's got some good upside. And really, once you get out of the top 50 picks, your best bet at corner is throwing darts at a dartboard and hoping to get guys with good traits and good upside and hope that they develop. We finally have a running back off the board. It's Breece Hall out of Iowa State to the Bills. I think the Bills should highly consider Breece Hall in round 1. I did not end up picking him because Kaiir Elam was still on the board, and there wasn't really anybody who I thought Breece Hall would be that great of a pick to up until the Bills at 57. If this was a mock draft with trades, I probably would have had the Bills move up for him. He's my 17th overall player in the class. He's by far my number 1 running back, but I just don't think there's anybody in between the Bills' first pick and now that Breece Hall would have been the best pick for them. So the Bills luck out. Buffalo has to be the biggest winner of this draft class, getting 2 top 20 players on my board with Kaiir Elam and Breece Hall. Although technically everybody here is a winner because I made all of these picks for them thinking that this was what I would do, and so I think everybody made the best pick they could have, but Buffalo especially made 2 very good ones. Sam Williams, edge rusher out of Ole Miss to the Falcons. He tested well at the Combine. He's really starting to get some buzz a little bit. I think he's worth a day 2 pick, especially for a team who needs some bodies going after the quarterback. Trey McBride, tight end, Colorado State to the Packers. This is too good a value here to pass up. McBride, for me, is the best tight end in this class. Robert Tonyan is fine, but he's coming off the injury, so I don't know how much you want to depend on him. I think Aaron Rodgers would be quite happy if Green Bay ended up with Jahan Dotson, Drake London, and Trey McBride. Cole Strange, guard out of Chattanooga to the Bucs. So, unfortunately for the Bucs, Ali Marpet, their talented second-round small school guard, retired. Here's your new second-round small school guard. Cole Strange has a lot of parallels in his game to Ali Marpet. Not to say he will be the next Ali Marpet, but I think he's going to be very good. Calvin Austin to the 49ers. This kid is a playmaker. Kyle Shanahan likes playmakers. Enough said. Zion McCollum, cornerback, Sam Houston State to the Chiefs. I gave them Andrew Booth in the first round, but it doesn't hurt to add more talented corners. And again, this is the range where you focus on corners with traits. Zion McCollum has size, length, athleticism, and traits. Luke Fortner, center out of Kentucky to the Bengals. Based on my board, the value here is a little bit high for Fortner, but I don't have a problem with him here going late in the second round. Ted Karras is a fine center, but he could always move over to guard. Fortner is an unbelievably smart player, and I think he'll be able to contribute very early on. And then my final pick of the day here at 64 will be Boye Mafe, edge rusher from Minnesota to Broncos. Mafe either ends up in round 1 or early round 2. I'm just not as high on Boye Mafe. Again, he's an older player who's raw. Despite great athleticism, I don't trust that a player who's going to be practically 24 years old by the time he makes his debut is in the best position to develop in the long term. I see the athletic upside with him, but he's got a lot of work to do. So that's going to conclude this video. Let me know what you thought of it. Again, I'm not expecting everyone to agree. I've actually expected a lot of disagreements because this was based off of my personal board, not what I think will happen, but what I would do if I was these teams. And I know there are going to be people probably going after my head in the comment section. I'm already fully prepared. So nonetheless, I hope everybody enjoyed. Make sure to hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.